everybody, and welcome to Summit 25 Renewal. Before we jump into our program today, we'd like to remind you of some quick guidelines to ensure that everyone has a good experience participating through Zoom. First, while you are welcome to keep your camera on or off, depending on your personal preference, we do ask that you stay muted until our breakout session time. This first hour or so is designed for our staff and special guests to share information with you, so staying muted will allow them to do so uninterrupted. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties that require assistance, or if you have any questions, you can message a member of our communications team, Lindsay Garcia or Jamie Butler, directly in the chat, and they'll respond to you in a timely manner. Thank you again for being here. First and foremost, we want to ground our time together in Scripture. Our theme this year is renewal, and I want to draw our attention to Isaiah 40, verse 31 to explore this theme. In Isaiah, we read, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." This is the word of the Lord. It is so wonderful to be gathered here together as the EEN community, and I'm so grateful that you've all taken the time to join us today live or through the recording later on. My prayer for this community, both for the next 2 hours together and for all of 2025, is that we find our hope in the Lord and that our strength will be renewed for this important, life-saving work of caring for God's creation. Before we jump into the program and looking out into 2025, let's take a moment to celebrate all that God has accomplished with and through you, our EEN supporters and advocates, in 2024. Thank you so much for being a part of EEN and for making this work possible. We're so thankful for the people who were a part of and supported this work in 2024. And I'm so looking forward to what God has in store for us to accomplish together in 2025. Now, I am so thrilled to introduce our first keynote discussion of the day, which will be moderated by Young Evangelicals for Climate Action National Organizer and Spokesperson Lauren Kim, who will introduce our special guest speaker. Lauren has been involved with YECA since 2019, serving as a project manager, college fellow, and steering committee member. Her passion for creation care stems from her appreciation of nature and time spent working on farms. I'm so excited for her to be moderating our discussion today. And Lauren, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Tori. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It is an honor for me to introduce Tri Robinson, who has been absolutely integral in my faith and creation care journey. We met back in 2019 when I was in college, and he was helping me learn more about creation care when I was just a Christian who liked science. I liked nature. I liked farms and ranching, but I didn't know how to put the two together. So a little bit about Tri is he is driven by a strong faith and a passion for the kingdom of God. Tri has given the greater part of his adult life to Christian leadership after a profound life-changing experience in 1980 while working among the Karen Hill tribe people on the border of Burma and Thailand. He and his wife, Nancy, made the decision that Tri would leave public education and enter full-time ministry. In 1989, they moved to Idaho to establish and build the Vineyard Christian Fellowship of Boise. Over the next 25 years, Vineyard Boise grew into a strong outreach church with a membership of about 3,000 people. And they've developed a 25-acre campus of facilities, which serves the community around them as well as the world's poor. Please join me in welcoming Tri. So, I know you, obviously, but for the people who don't know you, can you share a little bit about your personal experiences, and where your faith and environmental stewardship intersect?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a long story and the short story. My whole life is the long story. But really, I mean, I was raised in the mountains, hunting, fishing. It was just a big part of my growing up. And then went off to the College of Idaho from Southern California in the 1960s. And at a bonfire on a lake outside of Caldwell, Idaho, I met Nancy, my wife, one night. And, our first conversation really was about what kind of life we wanted to live together. And both of us, were committed to this life of living with the land. And so I after graduate work, we got married a year later and then did a year of graduate work, but then moved onto an old family ranch that was, off the grid, no, uh, no power, spring-fed water. It heated by a wood cook stove in the kitchen and a big fireplace in the living room, and we were just newlyweds, but we just and very poor. So we put in a garden and an orchard and started raising animals, and even with the help of a little hunting, and whatever, we just fell in love with that lifestyle. And so it was just naturally in us. We raised our kids in that lifestyle, built long stretches of trail in the wilderness area in the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Pacific Crest Trail with a team of mules in the summer times, and was a school teacher the rest of the time until, like you said, I went on this trip. Like in those days, it was the Jesus movement had kind of impacted our life, and both of Nancy and I had sort of left the church of our parents, like so many Gen Zs and millennials have been doing lately, looking really for something richer and deeper and more meaningful for our life. And ultimately, in the midst of that, in the midst of our lifestyle, the Jesus movement kind of captured us. And there was just part of that, it was a whole, we weren't like hippies, but we were like people that really wanted to return to nature. And the world was crazy. It's not as crazy as it is today by far, but it was very scary and crazy. We were, the world population had doubled in our lifetime already, and we were only like 20 years old, 22 years old. And books like The Population Bomb, and then later The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, all these things struck fear in us to where everything was going in the world. But the Jesus movement was primarily evangelical, and there was, it's another story for probably another time, but there became a division, especially in evangelicals, as a result of the moral majority and some of these other influences that came in the 80s that put the environment just in a in a camp outside our camp. And so I then, as you said, because of my experience with the Korean, I had experienced this people that were undergoing ethnic cleansing. They were living just in a state of desperation. They were slashing and burning large pieces of jungle just so they could raise enough rice for the next year. Then the monsoons would come, wash off the topsoil. And I just realized that the environment was putting them into abject poverty and desperation. And so that was my first exposure to what the environment could do, especially to the poor, and how important stewardship would be. Didn't put it all together until later on when my kids, who had been raised the way we had raised them, in the mountains and with a love of creation, came to me in about the year 2000 and challenged me. And they said, Dad, we've been, because as you mentioned, I had become a pastor, came to Idaho, started a church. It was very, a growing church. It was alive. It was fun. It was great. It was meaningful. And, but they came to me, both of them in kind of what we would call now Gen Z age group, probably, came to me and said, why is it that we've been raised in church our whole life and we've never heard one message on the environment? And yet it's all over the Bible. And so that was a turning point for me. If you've seen Cowboy Preacher, the movie, or if you've read my last book, which was A Journey of Gratitude, it tells the whole kind of my whole journey story. But they challenged me to go back and read my Bible with a green highlighter, and so I did, and I just got convicted. And Idaho is a very red state, and believe it or not, for a state that's so beautiful and everything, but there's really a pushback on anything concerning climate change or anything like that. And it's just a struggle. I lived in a capital city, had a lot of politicians in my church. I knew that by me preaching this message I was gonna get some major pushback, but I did it. After spending almost 6 months preparing for it. And I preached this message, and then when I did, I got standing ovations. I had three full services at that time, and all three services gave me standing ovations. Like they had just been waiting for someone to deliver this message and say it was okay to be a Christian and an environmentalist. And it was novel, in the early 2000s for somebody to do that. And I did get pushback, but I also believe that Christianity is a verb, discipleship's a verb, means it has to show action as its state of being. And so I immediately got my church, gave them opportunities to get out and engage in the environment. I found that because of the kind of broken families in America, there were so many kids raised in single parent homes and whatnot, didn't have a chance like I did to get out and really experience the mountains and the wilderness. And so I provided those opportunities. I got my church building backcountry trails and restoring trails so people could actually get out in there into the mountains. We started doing river cleanup in our city and serving the Fish and Game and the Forest Service and so on. And so everybody sort of got into that. We started our first recycling in our city. right at the church itself. And so I just got this swirl of life going in the church, which created national interest because nobody else seemed to be doing it much at that time. And PBS, of course, they did this thing called Boyer did a thing called Is God Green, and they featured our church. And that just started this whole thing. And as a result, ended up uh, attracting people like yourselves from all across the country that were sort of in closet environmentalists, were afraid to say much in the Christian context, and found out that it was okay. And so I wrote the book Saving God's Green Earth and Small Footprint, Big Handprint, both of which challenged people and pastors and leaders to do what I was doing. And here's the thing, everybody said, is this going to kill your church? But my church grew, but it grew primarily with young people. So that's sort of in it, as fast as I can tell it in this setting, that's sort of how it went. And here I am. Also, just I would add, my wife Nancy and I are now living on a sustainable farmstead. Of course, you came to visit me a number of years ago, and a lot of people do. But so we're trying to practice what we preach in our retirement and our older age. So
I love that. Yeah. And thank you for being bold in your faith, and being bold with what you say, especially to your congregation. That's so important. Uh, I read your book, Saving God's Green Earth, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. You speak a lot about the biblical truths. And I want to touch upon, are there any specific biblical teaching or your favorite verse that guide your views on caring for the earth?
well, there's a lot. My green Bible, the one I underlined or highlighted, it was pretty green. I realized how much there was, starting in Genesis all the way through. But I think
Oh, Genesis.
as an evangelical,
Mhm.
um, who cares about this, people coming to know God personally. I came upon the passage in Romans 1:20, and actually that first message that I preached that Sunday, I was actually teaching a different series on how do we, on the uh what was it, the how do we have assurance of the presence of God, and so there's so many different ways that different people come into that assurance of that God is real, he's alive, and he's well, and he wants a personal relationship. But one of them that I had overlooked was in Romans 1:20. And I'm just going to paraphrase it because I don't have a Bible in front of me, but he basically says, man is without excuse. Paul was saying this, man's without excuse from knowing God because he's revealed himself through his creation, his divine nature, his eternal powers, I mean, just the very nature of God is exposed through nature. I'd never seen that before. And I realized and this is hard, maybe it's different now a little, but in those days, especially, I mean, the church was, I mean, they were being almost mean-spirited towards people who cared about creation. They call them tree huggers, and you love polar bears more than you love unborn babies. I mean, I got all of that, and and I realized by doing that we were literally pushing people away who were being exposed to the nature of God through creation instead of using it as an evangelical, using it as a means to bring people to the reality of God. We were actually denying it. And so that was huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I definitely resonate with that verse as well. I feel like I can see God's face most clearly when I'm in nature. But I want to touch upon something you said about the church. So you mentioned before sometimes churches might not be receptive to the issue, um, or may have a hard time addressing it, largely. What do you believe is a church's role in encouraging action and awareness on environmental stewardship?
Well, like I said, first of all, I think discipleship is a verb.
Mhm.
And so I think we can't just preach things, say things once or twice and think and believe that people get it. they've got to get their hands and feet. Like I wouldn't teach a message about the poor and as Christians, our responsibility to the poor without giving people an opportunity to somehow play, through food ministry, participation. I mean, we had a big organic garden in
Mhm.
our church, and no, hundreds of people participated in that ministry, a big warehouse and everything. And we found out that we actually had to teach people how to cook like vegetables because obviously poverty, people who live really in abject poverty they're either eating at McDonald's or they're eating out of cans, I mean, and processed foods. And we literally had to have cooking classes so they could learn what to do with a zucchini. And so everybody, there was a place for everybody to participate. And uh, so that I think that was key. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And it kind of reminds me of Ian's tagline, which is that creation care is a matter of life. And when we care for creation, that includes caring for like the least of us, who are people who are poor, people who don't have access to grocery stores, people who are on the front lines, and in many cases are going to be affected first by
Yeah,
natural.
you know, um, it seems like there's this conflict between um, the sanctity of life and the environment. I mean,
Mm,
that's one of the big division points I've seen, and the pushback I've received. And I think, God, you know, if you really say that you believe in the sanctity of life, then you need to understand that things like climate change is affecting all life and
mm,
ultimately human life. When as the planet goes, so do we, you know. And to be stewards of this thing is, and especially, um, among the countries that are just so struggling now because of the climate crisis. And it's one of the major things that's motivating so much migration around the planet right now, and the problems that countries are having with immigrants, because they're desperate, because they can't grow food like they used to, because of drought, because of flood. I mean, uh, it's a real problem right now. And I think as the church, we have to, instead of being push back on that stuff and try to be self-protective with our borders, we should be working in those countries. Um, we need like a Christian Peace Corps or something that get down and help actually solve some of these problems that's causing some of this incredible desperation.
mm. Absolutely. I want to touch a little bit about advocacy because it's an underlying theme that I hear. So, how do you approach the challenge of engaging people who may not immediately see the connection between faith and environmental responsibility? Say someone at your church comes up to you. How do you talk to them about it?
Well, I think as Christians, a good way to do it is with scripture,
Mm,
but also pointing out to them. I mean, I say to people like, we need to be living this life right now, especially um, what I call it through the lens of the red letters, the actual words of Jesus, and the things that he spoke and said about kindness and compassion and mercy and justice, and engage in those things and filter out all the noise, all the political noise, all the other noise, and come back to the main and plain of our Christian faith. And I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, is try to point out to people um, the logic of just following the commission of Jesus and what that means is, giving water to the thirsty, right? Food to the hungry. Um, Water's a big problem on this planet, and it's becoming a bigger one all the time, a greater one. And climate change is, it's either too much water or not enough, but it's getting, even drinking water is a real problem on the horizon that the church should see that as a commission, to engage in this stuff. And I think the other thing is the church leadership needs to provide opportunities for that opportunity to engage.
For someone who's a young evangelical like me, what advice would you give to these young people who want to take up leadership, they want to do projects, and they want to combine their faith with caring for creation? What would you say to them?
I'd say a lot. I say, one thing this is a little sideline, but I know if you're in that generation and you're single, maybe thinking about at some point getting married, be careful and be mindful that you want to marry someone that matches your ideology, that will engage in this kind of a life, as Nancy and I have all these years. And that's kind of the thesis of my book, A Journey of Gratitude, like having a partner in life that sees it the way you see it, um, and wants to participate, because this stuff, you have to roll up your sleeves. You got to get your hands in the dirt. And,
Mhm.
and it's, as you know, when you came to see us, I mean, this is work here. But
Mhm.
growing sustainable food, being organic, farmer, all that stuff is a lot of work, and it takes both of us to get that work done. That's just one thing. I think that's a little bit of a sideline. So what was the question?
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good advice. Like you should be partnering with someone who has the same intention and being able.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like one of the things, and there has been this is another thing that's really been on my heart. I wrote another book a few years ago called Reform.
Mm.
Um, and it was really addressing before the word deconstruction came along, which is a
Mhm.
more popular word now for what reform was about. It's about a new generation that's rising up and seeing less relevance in the church,
Mhm.
in terms of their own fears, their own aspirations, their own, they're looking at this world and saying, you know, where's this all going?
Mhm.
And I don't think there's a Gen Z alive that I've met that doesn't at least know that climate change is real, no matter
Mhm.
what the media says and everything. They know that this world's changing, and it's changing pretty rapidly, and it needs some good decisions. And I think a new generation's going to have to come along. I think my generation, I'm a little disappointed with my generation. Um, and I look at the millennials and the Gen Zs, and that was the whole thing about reform, is that um, I really believe that there is a spiritual awakening on the horizon. Uh, when it was kind of like with us with the Jesus movement, we had a lot of fears,
Mhm.
and uh, we saw our government it was Watergate was going on. So we didn't trust our government. Vietnam was going on. It was a war we didn't even understand. We we were very conscious of environmental decline at that point. We called global warming then the greenhouse effect. I mean, we just had kind of a different, but we did know that there's troubles on the horizon. Some of the things that we feared are actually going on now, so it's different. I mean, it's like it's really happening. And so our generation, out of desperation, not all of it, but many of us, we found our hope in Christ, and we found our
Mhm.
hope, the fact that there was a God, and he knew, this wasn't catching him by surprise. He knew what was going on, and that we could put our hope in him and our trust in him, and that there was more than what meets the eye. There is a spirit realm,
Amen.
and that drew us to Christ, in those days. And it the Jesus movement was not like a major spiritual awakening that affected the whole world, but it was a bit of a revival that kind of awakened our generation and changed the whole format and the look of the church. I mean, before the Jesus movement came on, everything was hymnals and choirs and, pews. When the Jesus movement came along, I mean, we were meeting in warehouses or sometimes outside or in tents. I mean, anything, we wanted a whole new look of the Christian faith that was based on the main and plain, you know? And I believe that we are, our culture is so set up for that. And I've just really been praying for the emerging generations to take this a step further. But I
Yeah.
think the environment is going to be a huge piece of that.
Yeah.
I do. I think it's going to be a main piece of it. So,
Yeah. I liked what you said about how Jesus is our hope. And I think that sets us apart from so many secular environmental groups who may cast their hope on other things, or might feel this immense burden. But for us, our burdens are lifted. Uh, I really like that.
yeah, because if you get overly depressed about everything, you do nothing.
Exactly. Then you freeze.
Yeah, and that's the idea of the activism that you're talking about. Once you go there, you're
Mhm.
done. You've got to
Yeah.
have that hope. And that's
Yeah.
why it should be the church that should be championing this stuff.
Yes. Well, for individuals whose hope already is in Jesus and are involved in churches, how can they make a difference in creation care in their communities?
Well, I mean, like it really is in terms of church. It is a lot about leadership and having a leadership that has a vision,
Mhm.
and an understanding, a biblical understanding of why this is actually the church is the one that was commissioned to do this in the first place, starting in, God's people with Genesis 9, um, and so I think that when leaders capture this understanding that this really is ours to do, it's a major stewardship issue, and it's a commission. And then, of course, a good leadership doesn't just talk about it, it does something about it, and it provides all of those outlets like we did in those days when, after I wrote Saving God's Green Earth, we were all over the city, we were all over our state, and the world was waiting for it. I found myself opening Congress in prayer one time because of it, and I was with Prince Philip and at Windsor Castle one time because of it, having lunch with him. I mean, it took me places I never dreamed I would go. But most Christian leaders, frankly, are afraid of the subject because they're afraid they're going to get pushback from their people. And I just want to say, it was totally opposite for me. It
Mhm.
just opened doors. And, like I said before, our church grew, and it grew with youth, younger people. Yeah.
Mhm. Try. I want to end with one last question. Um, it sounds like you've done a lot in your career, and you've been to a lot of great places, and you've touched a lot of people's hearts. Uh, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind in your creation care and or religious work?
Well, I don't want to stand before the Lord one day and said, Lord, I didn't even try, you
Mm.
know. Sometimes, honestly, uh, Lauren, it's been pretty discouraging. Uh,
Mm.
I have, of course, because of my leadership role and in the early days with the EEN and a lot of the leaders, we all have had a struggle at times. There was a lot of disappointments, but all of those people are still like myself. We're still believing for this, and we're believing for you and for your generation to take this on and take the baton, take this mantle, and take it to a whole new place and a new level. But I feel good about the fact that someday I'm going to stand before the Lord and say, well, Lord, at least I tried. And I really wanted to honor your commission and your call on my life. And I did everything I could. And I just feel that I look at your staff at EEN, frankly, as I've met with them, just talking about this conference. And I've been so encouraged to see the age of your staff and the vitality of your staff and it just, I can't tell you what it does for me. It just
Mm.
excites me and it gives me hope.
Well, that's so good to hear, Try. And I just want to say, like, how great it is for us to serve a God who honors our every effort. And he sees everything, from whether it's a um, small work of our hands to a major project. He sees it all and he loves it all. So,
I remember, I remember, Lauren,
yeah.
I got this email
Mhm.
quite a few years ago from this young girl that said, I want to just come and visit you. And I go, why? She said, well, I just want to come and learn about the environment. And I said, really? Like, and I said, "Oh," and you basically said, well, I'm getting on an airplane. So, and so I said, okay, well, I'll meet you. And we brought you up here to the ranch, and you probably felt like you're coming to the ends of the earth up here.
Yeah.
Uh, we spent those, I don't know what, 5 days together, something like that. And we showed you Idaho and we talked and talked and talked and we talked. And I never knew what would come of that.
Mhm.
I would always honor that. I would always want that. Anytime anybody would want to, you know, see value in it. And then all of a sudden to find the position that you're in now, that you really have taken that baton and uh, you are carrying it on. And I mean, it just gives me such great hope. And I feel like, was it Anna and Simeon, in the temple waiting for, they said, well, we're going to just sit here until Jesus comes along, and and then we could die, after that because we'll be satisfied to know, and that's kind of like how we feel at this old age stage of our life. When we see you guys coming along filled with the Lord,
Mhm.
and fishing for this, it just gives us a peace and a fulfillment. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Of course, I'm happy to. And I can't believe that was 6 years ago when I went to visit you and Nancy on that ranch. Wow. I'm fine. Okay. I have one more question for you, and then I promise I'm done. So, for the people in the audience, how can we stay connected with your work?
Oh, good. Um, well, one thing I'm doing now because I can, I'm not in public ministry anymore, but I am trying to practice what I preach. Nancy and I, we have this organic farmstead, which we love to share with people. We have a good website, uh, timberbuttehomestead.com,
Mhm.
which kind of will take you to a lot of places. I'm mainly social media wise, I'm not much of a wizard, but I am on Facebook.
Mhm.
And the main thing I'm doing now is writing.
Mhm.
I can sit up here. You saw I have built a little rock chapel up on the hills. I tell people I feel like I'm a Protestant monk, because I have my little chapel, but I also have vineyard. We make wine, organic wine, good wine actually. And I work in my vineyard. I said I don't wear a robe, uh, but uh, but sometimes I feel like a, just a monk up here in my solitude, and I think and I dream and I pray and I work. And
Mhm.
I would love to share that with anybody who will listen. So
Yeah.
um, I really what I do now is pretty much right.
Yeah, that sounds so nice.
Mhm.
All right. Well, Try, thank you so much for coming here and speaking to us at Summit. For everyone in the audience, Try Robinson, you can follow him on social media, like on Facebook, as he mentioned, or check out his website, which is dropped in the chat. Try, thank you again so much for being here and sharing a little bit of your heart. We're so happy to have you.
Well, thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure and a
Yeah.
privilege.
Absolutely. Thank you again. So for our next speaker, I want to introduce Reverend Dr. Jessica Moerman. Jessica is someone who's near and dear to my heart. She is the CEO and EEN president and a climate and environmental scientist, pastor, educator, and advocate. She wears a lot of hats. She is on the board of the National Association of Evangelicals and received her PhD in Earth and Atmospheric Sciences from the Georgia Institute of Technology and has held research positions at Johns Hopkins University, University of Michigan. And prior to joining EEN, Jessica was a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the U.S. Department of Energy. So Jessica regularly speaks on issues related to climate change, pollution, children's health, and the intersection of science and faith. She's appeared on news outlets such as Good Morning America, to Christian Broadcasting Network, and other national news outlets. She's a co-founder pastor of her church, which she planted in 2016 with her husband Chris in Washington, D.C. Jessica is passionate about leading church communities towards positive solutions to safeguard our cities and neighborhoods. Please join me in welcoming Jessica Moerman. Hi,
Thank
Jessica.
you, Lauren. Thank you so much. And what an incredible conversation between yourself and Pastor Tri. And again, thank you, Pastor Tri, from all of us here at EEN for sharing your experience, your perspectives. I think it's wonderful that a vineyard pastor has a vineyard on your farmstead and ranch. That's just so beautiful. And thank you for your work of sowing into the next generation, leaders like Lauren, who we are just so thrilled to have with us now as our YECA national spokesperson and organizers. We are certainly benefiting from the seeds that you sowed. So thank you, Lauren and Tri. And also, thank you to all of you who are joining us today, both live and virtual. We are so grateful to be in partnership with each and every one of you in faithfully protecting God's creation and defending the life of all God's children so that they can have a healthy environment and safe climate to thrive in. We are grateful to be doing this together. As we gather today and look at the outlook for defending God's creation in 2025, I don't think it's a stretch to say that that outlook may look uncertain. We are certainly in uncertain times right now and complex and complicated times. And I have heard it described in many different circles as a time of shaking, of realignment. And I always believe, especially in times like this, it's always wise to turn to Scripture. And just like Tori led us in Isaiah at the top of the hour, I want us to sit in Isaiah again right now. And I love in Isaiah 55, verses 10 through 13. This is a beautiful creation care verse, I think, that can really speak so many truths to us in the time that we find ourselves now. It says, "As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater, so is my word that goes out from my mouth, the Lord's word that goes out from his mouth. It will not return empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. You will go out in joy and lead forth in peace. The mountains and the hills will burst forth into songs before you, and the trees of the field will clap their hands. Instead of the thorn bush, we'll grow the juniper. Instead of the briars, the myrtle will grow. Will be for the Lord's renown, an everlasting sign that will endure forever. This is the word of the Lord. And I love this verse, especially in this time, because it helps us see some everlasting truths that we can hold on to in a time of shaking, shared in just this beautiful poetic words of Isaiah, drawing from truths in God's creation. Just like the water from heaven will not return to the heavens without bringing flourishing life, so is it that God's word will always be purposeful, and his purposes will always be achieved. What is this purpose that we see? It's a purpose for life. And in this time where it may feel like we might be headed towards the thorn bush or the briar, this verse in Isaiah helps us stay rooted to God's promise and his plans and his purposes. They're for flourishing. They are for redemption. And yes, they are for renewal, our theme this year. And in this day, it will produce the cypress and the myrtle, and that will stand as a monument, an everlasting sign that will not be destroyed. I have to say, I take such comfort in this. This is a beautiful picture in this time of shaking. In a time of shaking, it's also very easy to lose focus. And like it says in Ephesians 4, about alluding to being tossed back and forth by the wind and the waves, I can tell you, as we've seen many developments happen, just even in this first month, and we see so many world events and national events that can absolutely shake us and make us feel like tossed by the winds and the waves. It's a moment for us to turn and hold fast to the one who stills the waves, who is the anchor in the storm and our rock and our firm foundation. That is Jesus, and that is our Lord God, who, again, his plans and purposes are for prospering. And that's what we are committed to doing here today at EEN, of staying focused on what the Lord has entrusted to us, staying focused on our vision. EEN's vision is to share the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we envision a world with abundant life for all, where we are free from the burden of pollution. All creation flourishes in right relationship, and children have the hope and expectation for a healthy, vibrant future, just like we see read in Isaiah 55, this picture of flourishing. This is what we're holding fast to. And we're holding fast to what EEN exists to do, which is our mission to inspire and equip our fellow evangelicals to love God and others by rediscovering and reclaiming our biblical mandate to care for creation and to work toward a stable climate and healthy, pollution-free world. We are so honored to have you be participants in this shared vision and mission. And I think, as we saw in this conversation between Lauren and Pastor Tri, this is truly a multi-generational vision. This is a long-term vision. It will be to fully achieve this vision of a healthy, pollution-free world. It may be with seeds that we sow that we don't get to see the fruit of. It requires continued action. It requires being in it for the long haul. And that's what we here at EEN are committed to do, and to do it through that mission. And so that's what I really want to invite you into as we look into what is in store for 2025. To join us in a renewed call to come together for God's creation, a renewed call and commitment for faithful action, no matter the circumstances, to be obedient to God's mandate, an awesome assignment for us to steward His creation well, and a renewed commitment, especially for EEN, to be a catalyst that brings people together for this action, for that shared vision that spans across so many of the lines that divide us, that desire for a healthy future for ourselves and our families and our children and for the next generation, for clean air, clean water, and a safe climate for all of us to thrive in. And that requires, again, us coming together, working together, so that we can see action that withstands changes in administration, that withstands the winds of change. And that requires, and to have that durable action, that means coming together across the lines that divide us. That is just a beautiful, I think, prophetic vision and picture that we did see in Ephesians 4 that also talks of unity. And yesterday, I had the pleasure to speak at to many presidents of Christian colleges and universities from across the world, speak to them about creation care. We had presidents of colleges, Christian colleges and universities from Kenya, from Australia, Romania, Korea, and the Netherlands, and so many more. And one of the presidents from a university in the Netherlands came up to me and shared that in Dutch, there's a word that is spelled EEN, the abbreviation for us at the Evangelical Environmental Network of EEN. And in Dutch, that word spelled EEN means unity. And I just felt like that was such a beautiful reminder of what is one of our core missions, and especially is needed in this day and age to bring people together for faithful action. And so that's what we want to invite you into today. So as it comes of looking at 2025, I think there are lessons as we look forward to that of what we can do. There's many lessons we can take from the past. And one of those lessons in achieving EEN's mission to defend life, protect God's creation, and create family-sustaining jobs through federal policy solutions. We can look to EEN's history of working together specifically with the first Trump administration and progress that we made then. And I'm here to tell you that by working together, there is progress to be had. We've done that, have a history of doing that. Back in the first Trump administration, we came together to support our public lands and national parks through the Great American Outdoors Act. We advanced natural climate solutions through the Trillion Trees Initiative. And we also saw advancements in clean energy with the Energy Act of 2020, which up until that time was the most significant and historic piece of federal legislation advancing clean energy. And so as we look to the past of having this track record of working well together for progress, that's something that we can see to come. There are opportunities in 2025 to repeat that again. And so some opportunities that I see for progress that we would love to have your support and participation in is, again, continuing to support our public lands and national parks with the Great American Outdoors Act, which provided historic funding to restore our national parks. Reauthorization of that main vehicle, the Legacy Restoration Fund. This is up for reauthorization this year, and something we'd love your participation, your voice in making sure that this reauthorization goes through and this fund stays strong to invest in our national parks and public lands. Also, natural climate solutions with the president's commitment to regenerative agriculture and farmer-led conservation as we look to finish the job on reauthorizing the Farm Bill. this is something that we love your continued work on and are so grateful for your action of lifting this up over the last several years. Let's keep this chorus going. And then also reducing global carbon emissions. I know you may have seen news of the withdrawal of the U.S. from the Paris Agreement. That's not the end of the story for partnering and taking action to see the reductions of carbon emissions on the global stage. There's the opportunity in this administration and this Congress to advance critical market-based solutions, specifically through a bipartisan supported carbon border adjustment or tariff that would be a market-based mechanism to level the playing field and ensure that across the world, as we have goods produced, that those who are doing that with low emissions, doing it cleanly in a way that protects God's creation and defends the health of all God's children, that keeps everyone on the world stage to a level playing field there. And so that's something we'll also be working on in this season. But also as we look to the past, we have a history as well here at EEN of speaking out whenever we see that actions and measures are going counter to protecting God's creation and defending the health of all God's children. And this is something that we will also continue to press into, and opportunities that you have that we anticipate for speaking out and holding our leaders to their words of saying, wanting clean air, clean water, and a healthy future for our children, looking specifically to preserving key local climate and clean energy benefits that were made possible through tax credits and rebates in the Inflation Reduction Act. We've got incredible partners of Republican senators and congresspeople speaking out in support of these tax credits that are bringing new clean jobs to their districts and their states. And that is something that we want to partner with them on, of lifting our voices, of saying we need to preserve these incredible incentives to advance clean energy that is benefiting our local communities now. We need these. We'll also be speaking out to prevent rollbacks of new pollution safeguards from soot, methane pollution, carbon pollution, mercury, pipeline safety, and more. And you can learn more about that in the breakout with Kim Anderson later today on advocacy. I encourage you to check that out. And then also in support of our public lands, of maintaining modernized oil and gas leasing practices on our public lands that ensure that we, the American taxpayers, are getting a fair share of entrusting our public lands for energy development, as well as bonding reforms that ensure that upfront, as we entrust oil and gas companies to produce on our public lands, that they upfront put up the costs that are needed to return the land back to its original state, to clean it up once they're done. This is something that we also have the opportunity to make sure stays in place in this time. And so with these opportunities, we've been talking about a lot. This has been focused on what we can do at the federal scale, the national scale. But I want to remind you that there are so many important scales of action when it comes to defending God's creation, from what we can do in our own households, what we can do together as a group in our churches and our college campuses, what we can do at the local and state levels. And so I'm really excited for you now to hear about work from the EEN team of what's happening on state levels that you can get involved in this year. We'll also hear, and Kim Anderson will lead us through that. You'll also hear again from Lauren Kim, who will share with us work from our Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, what's happening on our college campuses. And then you'll also have the opportunity to attend a breakout with Reverend Jeremy Summers, our community and church engagement director, on what you can do in your churches as well. And so with that, I'd love to hand it over to my colleague, Kim Anderson, Anderson, EEN's Director for Member Mobilization, to share updates from the EEN team on all of these scales of action. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Jessica said, my name is Kim Anderson, and I'm the Director of Member Mobilization. And mobilization is one of the adverbs or the action verbs that is in our mission statement. And I know for me, sometimes when things get frustrating in the world, it can be easy to just sit back and complain, but I feel a lot better when I'm taking action. And I'm going to put a verse in the chat. Esther 4:14, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. I believe that this is a time God has created, and he calls us to take action during that time. So I just invite you to think about what he's calling you to do. In terms of member mobilization for 2024, we recruited people for hearings for various EPA, Department of Transportation rules. We had action alerts and petitions, and I see a lot of familiar faces on here, people that spoke up and said, yes, I want to take action last year, and supported us in that. This year, we're going to be starting to do a quarterly training for our champions program, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we usually do a summer of action. We'll be doing that again this year. Next slide, please. So the Champion Creation Care Champion program is basically a way for you can volunteer. And when you sign up, you can use the QR code. When you sign up, there's all kinds of questions about on what level do you want to take action, like using the circles Jessica just shared, what topics matter to you, things like that. And then you fill out that form, and then we get the information. And then when we have an opportunity that matches, we reach out and ask you if you're available in that time. And so that's how one way people can get involved on an advocacy level. And we are hosting a training, next slide, I think. We're hosting a training on February 20th to kind of just acclimate you to the Champions program if you haven't been involved in it before. And so just to kind of introduce you to it a little bit more, but also the advocacy breakout would be a good place to learn more today. Next slide. I'm going to give a couple of updates. We've got a lot of people that do state work, and so this represents the great work of a lot of different people. Carolyn Heckman and I do work in Pennsylvania. She focuses on the eastern half and policy, and I focus on the western half. And we've had outreach in Philly and Pittsburgh. We started a newsletter with lots of webinars and other education throughout the year. We also collected signatures for petitions for a couple of state-related items, both of which got over 30,000 signatures. And in the year ahead, we're going to continue doing a lot of the same work. Next slide, please. In Ohio, we have Dean Vinfaro, who has been doing amazing work, and it's been fun for me to watch this. I've been with EEN for about 4 years, and we've in this last year seen so much growth and excitement in Ohio, and it's so fun to watch because sometimes this work can be hard. And so in Cleveland, we have a few churches that we work with. This year, we're going to be doing some composting and tree education in Cleveland. 5 churches planted wildlife habitats. We've also expanded into Dayton, been working with Vineyard Columbus, and have engaged on a couple of bills on the state level. Next slide. In the Midwest, we have Tim Olson, who's out every week. He's in a different state. Sometimes he's in 3 different states. He does amazing outreach work and knows so much about regenerative farming. I learn something every time I talk to him. So we have the Regenerate newsletter, Faith and Ag webinars. He hosted a roundtable with Congressman Finstead last year, and there's going to be From the Heartland showings and Watch Party Toolkit coming up. And as you learned, we also have a toolkit for Cowboy and Preacher as well. So a lot of great work happening out in the Midwest. And then we're starting to expand into Texas and Louisiana to do some methane work to advocate for state implementation plans and other things on the state level to work to decrease the amount of methane pollution in that area. And then finally, in Indiana, we've got Jeremy Summers, who is doing amazing outreach in Indiana and does a lot of other things as well. Every year in Indiana, they have a Creation Fest, and that's just a wonderful event where a lot of groups come together and kind of have like a job fair type of environment where you can learn a lot about various things in the state. He's hosted roundtable conversations with Central Indiana church leaders and has created a Creation Fest toolkit if it's something you might want to have in your area, and has done some advocacy in that area as well. Jeremy also is focused on church and community engagement, and there's a breakout on that as well, where you can learn about some of the resources and some of the actions. And that's going to be a very dynamic group. Just wanted to share a couple of pictures. We have book clubs happening. Caleb Haynes, who is on the call today, wrote an amazing book called Garbage Theology, and we have book clubs for that happening in Columbus and Dayton this year, and potentially Cleveland. And so that's some of the activity that's been happening there. And then the next slide, the top right, is a picture of Creation Fest, and then the bottom left is Carolyn Heckman and I have done some work on Solar for Schools in Pennsylvania, which passed, and it's a wonderful program that would add money to Inflation Reduction Act money to help schools go solar, and then they can apply the savings to things that matter more than paying for energy in their schools. So thank you for that. I will pass it over now to Lauren. Oh, sorry, one more thing. If you'd like to know more about how to take action, we also have an EEN Action sign up. So if you want to get an email, we can send you an email when there are opportunities to take action. And that's separate from our EEN email. So if you want to scan that QR code, you can do that now. And then I'm going to pass it over to Lauren Kim, who's going to talk about YECA. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. So I'm going to talk about Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. YECA is the youth partner ministry for EEN, and we work with our under 30 population. Next slide. Okay, so some highlights from the 2024 year. We onboarded 6 new college fellows, and they were working on projects ranging from paper towel composting to solar energy calculations. We also saw the project completion of 2 of our community fellows in the fall. So we're now onboarding our 25 to 26 cohort. In terms of alumni engagement, we have our alums testimonies featured on our socials. And we actually had our very first alum meeting in April of 2024, where we gathered previous steering committee members in Milwaukee to talk about faith, vision, and direction. Some action items is we have some new leadership. We added 6 new members to our steering committee. I was added on as a new national organizer and spokesperson this past July. So a lot of new direction coming this year. And we've also updated our resource page project. So on our website, we have a new tab with new resources ranging from worship materials to social media influencers that we admire. We also attended COP and CCOP. So we were also quoted in the Church Times UK for our presence there. This year, what set us apart was from previous years is our voter campaign. So this was a very important year for YECA. We released some op-eds, we had text banking, voter tools, we tabled, and we had some training webinars. A really important quote that I want to share with y'all is from Jaden Silver, who is a current fellow, and he wrote for Earthbeat that in today's world, where the climate crisis looms larger than ever, voting is a powerful tool in our quest for a sustainable and livable planet. So I just want to leave that with you all. Next slide. So I want to zero in on our community fellows and our college cohorts. So our 2 community fellows who finished in the fall, one is Madeline Armstrong, who's a PhD candidate at Central Michigan, and she taught environmental science to 500 summer campers in Maine. And Jenna Cobb is an involved church member in San Gabriel Valley, and her project was organizing a creation justice fair at her Los Angeles church. I have some numbers about our college cohort from last year. So we reached about 1,388 people through 28 events. We began 6 environmental clubs, had 3 research projects, and delivered 2 sermons on campus. All right, so what's next for us? For more information about YCA in this past 2024 year, be sure to check out our newly published annual report, which is now on our website. Our applications are live for our Community Fellows cohort, so please check that out if you or you know anyone who is under the age of 30 and willing to have a project out in a community, a church, a camp, anything. The steering committee met for the winter 2025 retreat on increased grassroots efforts this year. If you're interested in getting involved, check out our websites for more ways to get involved with us. And if you are or know anyone under the age of 30, be sure to check out our Advocates program as a part of our improved and bolstered grassroots program. Thank you. All right, so we're now going to be sending you guys to breakout rooms.
Okay, everybody, thank you. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. I hope you had great conversations like our group did. We're just going to finish up here with a few announcements and a prayer. So thank you again for joining Summit 25 Renewal. This is an important time, and I'm just really excited that we had so many people here and such engaging conversations. So thank you for coming. Just want to give you a few ways that you can engage after the fact. If you want to go to the next slide. So one last chance to become a Creation Care champion. Again, if you want to speak out and be an advocate for Creation Care, this is a way that you can engage, and you fill out a form and we reach out to you when we have opportunities. So you can sign up for that. We will be having a training for Creation Care champions on February 20th, whether you're a new one or if you've been around for a while. We'll be having a brief training on that day, and you can sign up using that QR code. And then we are hosting a book club called Reforesting Faith, and our book clubs are always amazing. I'm excited for this one with Dr. Matthew Sleeth, and talking so much about what trees can teach us. We've been doing a lot of tree work in the last couple of years, so excited for that opportunity. You can sign up using that QR code. And then it has really been on the heart of many of us on staff to be praying during this time. And so the first thing that we can do is look to the scriptures and look to God in prayer. And so we're going to be hosting quarterly prayer meetings this year. The first one will be on March 6th, and you can sign up using that QR code. And if you ever have a prayer request, you can always send an email to us and we will lift it up in prayer. Our team meets once a week and prays. Next, we have the Faith and Agriculture webinar coming up on February 27th. At 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, and you can sign up to hear from these wonderful farmers on February 27th. And then if you want to learn more about YECA, we've got the Climate Fellows on the community or the college level. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's something I wish I'd had available to me when I was back in my youth days. And so you can learn more about those opportunities through these QR codes on this slide. And then EEN Action is our advocacy partner. And so if you would like to sign up for emails from EEN Action, where you get different and more opportunities to speak out through action alerts and things like that, you can sign up using that QR code. And then if you'd like to donate to EEN, we take a lot of individual donations, and it's part of what keeps us going, and a way that you can partner with us, so you can use the QR code there as well. And then I'm going to leave you with a verse and a prayer. But for those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Isaiah 40:31. This is a time when it's easy to feel weary. And if we rest in God and pray and focus on scripture, we can make a difference. And I encourage you to join us in whatever way you can. I thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to close in prayer. Dear God, thank you for this time. Thank you so much for the people that have come together and the people that are listening later. We just ask that you would help each of us know the ways that you want us to take action. Help each of us remember to lean on you. And we just thank you because you are a God of comfort and a God of strength. It's It's in your name we pray. Amen.